Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and just spreading positivity and inspiration. We're all about positive vibes here on the show, and I've got a very special guest with me today. He is the other half of the Chase twins. Pleased to welcome the one and only Logan Chase to Wrestling with Heart. Welcome, Logan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's get into it. So you're from Colorado, right?
I live in Colorado now, but originally I'm actually from Ohio.
Okay. What part of Ohio?
So Nikki and I actually grew up in Bryan, Ohio, which is the most northwest corner of Ohio. The county we lived in bordered Indiana and Michigan. Most people haven't heard of Bryan, Ohio, but we do have a couple cool things there. It's where Spangler Candy is. So we make the Dum Dum Pops, and then Ohio Art's there. So it's like the Etch-a-Sketch, Betty Spaghetti, and all that kind of cool stuff used to be made in Bryan.
Oh, very nice. See, you learn something new every day. Etch-a-Sketch. I remember playing with those when I was young.
Yeah, they even have an Etch-a-Sketch museum there as well, which is kind of crazy.
Unbelievable. Just like draw whatever and just play with the machines, the knobs.
Yep. And they have some people that'll come in and do artwork for it, and they leave the artwork up for like a year and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. All right. So you were a big fan growing up of wrestling. Nikki had told me like you had all the action figures.
Yep.
Like what was it about professional wrestling that, got you hooked?
Oh man. I guess really it was the storytelling and everything kind of like that. I still remember the first episode of Raw that I saw. It was actually the episode where Cactus Jack and Terry Funk's character at the time, I think it was Chainsaw Charlie, were pushed off the dumpster by DX. And I just remember kind of being like, I think I was only like 11 years old, but kind of just being baffled, like, oh my gosh, how can this happen? But I was hooked right away because like after that, I almost watched Raw every week. Just because I was so into like the characters and the storylines, and I love Stone Cold Steve Austin just like everybody else at the time too. So yeah.
Attitude Era, man, that was a wild time in the business. Very popular. So many different characters and storylines that just really just piqued, and so many people's interests. What was it about the Attitude Era that was like, that you felt like was important?
Honestly, I think it was the characters. Almost felt like every character was over the top, but it was still to the point where it wasn't so much over the top that it was in your face. It was over the top where you were entertained and you just wanted to see those characters every week. I think it was a roster too, because they had like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, D-Generation X, Mankind. They just so deep with characters and storylines, and it was almost like a weekly drama that you had to tune into and stay up to date with.
Yeah, it was like a soap opera.
Yeah.
Just like a cliffhanger every week just got you like wanting to know, left you wanting more, wanting to see what was going to happen the next week. So man, Stone Cold was the man. He was like the guy like running the joint, as well as The Rock. So like was Stone Cold like your favorite wrestler? Was he somebody you looked up to?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I was like anti-establishment growing up, but I did connect with that whole side of the character of like, hey, I don't like other people telling me what to do, so I'm gonna do what I want to do. So I always connected with that as a kid. So that was definitely what brought me to Stone Cold, and then just how the interactions he had with Mr. McMahon too, or on a weekly basis, were always just gold. So it was easy to kind of fall in love with that character and want to watch me week by week and see what he was gonna do.
Yeah. Nikki, when I had her on, she was saying when she started watching, she wasn't allowed to watch some scenes from Raw because it was too violent or inappropriate, I guess, for the time. How did you take that?
Well, I think the biggest thing was we weren't allowed to stay up past like 10 to watch it. So like, especially being on the East Coast, I learned really quickly that if I got a tape and I recorded it, when I got home from school the next day before mom was there, I could watch the whole episode.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got around it. Was I would always just I knew like at a certain time when we were gonna be able to watch it anymore, so I would record it, and the next day I would get home and watch it. So I was keeping up with everything on the show.
That's so cool. And it was just a big boom period for the business because, you know, wrestling has always experienced, ups and downs with whether it's the Attitude Era or the Rock and Wrestling connection of the 80s. They just had like characters, and from the TV show came the action figures. They sold like the Jakks Pacific toys, like Stone Cold, The Rock, and Undertaker, DX. Just good times. Just like actually, like they had like the ring, like the toy rings and the Titantrons.
Yep.
Did you ever get to do that? You got to do that, right?
Oh man, I had like a whole bucket of it. I had like 2 different rings. I had the Titantron entrance, which I think was my favorite thing, the whole thing, because you could do like the whole entrance and everything. And I'd even make up like pay-per-views. Like I'd draw my own little pay-per-view cover for like Over the Edge or whatever, and put it on the Titantron, so it felt like it was my own little pay-per-view show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So man, I love that stuff. Especially as a kid, it was like if it wasn't on TV, then I had my toys out and I was playing with them.
Oh man. So what was the point where you said, this is what I want to do for a living?
Well, I kind of fell away from wrestling when I got to high school, just because especially when you're in high school, sports and everything, it's easy to fall for the wayside because so much is going on in your life. And about 2014, Nikki got me interested in it again. She actually told me to turn into an episode of Raw, and it was the Seth Rollins episode where he's asking or demanding John Cena bring back the Authority, or he's going to break Edge's neck. And I just remember being enthralled with the scene again, but also kind of, you're older now. I think I was like 23 at the time. So I'm kind of like, man, this is kind of weird. Why am I watching this stuff again? But I'm also so entertained by it. And then we ended up going to like, I think our first live SmackDown for the first time since like when we were kids. And I just remember watching it live and being like, man, this is something that I would just love to do because I just love the characters. I love the athletic side of it. And it was just something like I could always see myself doing. And I've always been a creative person. When I was in high school, my friends and I always liked to make tapes and videos and stuff like that, short little skits. So it also kind of looked like a way for me to kind of get that creative outlet that I had been missing so much too.
Were you like into film? Did you go to film school or want to pursue like video as a video production?
I secretly, yes, but I actually graduated with a political science degree. But
Nice.
in college, I took so many film classes that I actually maxed out those credits, and they said that if I was going to take any more, I actually had to be a film major, and I had already committed to political science at that point. So I was kind of like, well, I guess I've taken as many as I can.
Yeah. Okay. You guys got into wrestling at the same time. Did you start training before Nikki? Did Nikki start training before you? How did that all sort of work?
Yeah, Nikki started training before me, actually. Maybe only like a month or two. But I remember she kind of told me, I don't know, I think it was like in a little conversation we had, that she was actually doing some professional wrestling, and I almost got super jealous because I was like, well, how could you not tell me?
Oh no.
Yeah, so I finally got that chance when she was like, told me this is where I'm doing it at. If you want to come by and try it out one Friday night, and I jumped right in. I was like, heck yes, I do.
Oh man. So you got into it. What can you tell me about like wrestling school, getting the training? Walk me through like the training process.
Well, it's long, that's for sure. It's not something where you can really just like jump in and within a month or two, you're ready to go. I'm an avid runner. I like to do 5Ks and stuff like that too. With a 5K, you could really take maybe 4 to 6 weeks and almost be ready for a 5K. But with professional wrestling, it's one of those things where you have to build those foundations and kind of build from that foundation up until you're really ready to actually be in the ring and work. So it's strenuous. It's tough on the body, especially with the training. We were going 2 to 3 nights a week, sometimes 4 nights a week. So it's exhausting too, because you're working that from 7 to 9 and trying to come home and unwind after a long night of practice. And then you got to turn around the next day, go to work, and then get back in the ring and do it again. So it's strenuous, it's time consuming, and it definitely wears on the body. But once you have those foundations built and you're about a year into it, you can finally start to see the bigger picture as you're working towards it, and it starts to become more of a realistic goal. Because I can tell you, man, we were probably about 6 months into it, and we were still kind of working on just some of the basic drills and lockups and stuff like that, and just thinking about going out and having a whole match or something that I couldn't kind of grasp in my head because we just weren't there yet. But almost like after a year into it, working with Duff Doyle, working with Eric Angel, working with Adrian Grimm and all those guys at the butcher shop, and finally going in and working some matches and having them kind of explain it to us. This is how it goes. This is how you build a match. It was great because that's finally we got to see everything we had been building on that foundation and see how it applies to working it in the ring. And it almost all clicked at one time. And you're like, oh, okay, so this is how this all works together.
It's definitely a different animal than, doing stuff like running or doing any other form of athletics, because you're pushing yourself like to the bone almost. Like with running, it's like, yeah, it's good for your heart rate and cardio, but when you're actually like physically doing something where you're taking so many, bumps on the ground, you're falling constantly on the ground, or you're just laying it in, with
Yep.
another person. It's so much different because it involves a lot of pain,
Yep. Yeah. The only thing I could really ever compare it to is when I was in high school football. And back then we really practiced full pads almost the whole week. They didn't really slow things down. And it's like almost being mid-season football practice after you've been practicing and going through all those games and your body's worn down, but you still know you have like 3 weeks of games left. So you got to keep pushing through those practices. But that's almost every week with professional wrestling, because if you're taking those bumps in the ring, those small impacts, they add up. So, being able to kind of work through that soreness and being smart too, to realize that like, oh man, maybe this isn't just sore. Maybe I do have an injury and I kind of got to sit out or take it back too, is really important.
Were there any injuries that you experienced when you first started training, started working out?
The only ones that I had were just some bursitis in my knees and my elbows. That's really been the only one that's kind of been persistent, where I kind of had to take maybe a day or two off just because the worst one was my elbow kind of locked up at one point. But once I got better elbow pads and knee pads, I kind of helped that one out a lot better too.
That's good. It's always good to, protect yourself, protect your body, protect your opponent. Now, what pieces of advice did you take away from your training that you still utilize to this day?
The biggest one is just always listening to, especially in the ring, whether it's to the crowd for the reaction of how the match is going, or to your opponent. So you guys are making sure you're listening to each other and keeping each other safe with what's going on in the ring too. You always got to be listening. You can't go into the ring, single-minded focus. You got to be able to have that open mind, listening, ready for things to change on the fly too, because you may have something planned in the back that sounded real cool, and then something doesn't work out in the ring the way you thought it was going to, and you got to change it on the fly. And that's where being able to adjust, listen, and work together is really important. I think I got lucky too, because my first time going out to the ring was actually for Nikki's first match. So I got to go out as her manager. And that kind of helped too, because it gives you that chance to kind of go out there and experience it, but not necessarily going to the ring for the full thing. So I kind of get that experience to go out there in the ring and like, okay, this is what it's going to be like if I have my first match. And then literally a month later, I had my first match. I had nerves for sure. I'm very nervous. I got to work with Adrian Grimm, so a veteran for the ring, which was really awesome. The craziest thing about that night was, I think the third match in, they actually broke the ring.
Yikes.
So we had like a good hour-long delay while I did kind of a repair, and it was actually broken boards. So there was like kind of a spot in the ring where they kind of adjusted it, so the ring wasn't exactly where we wanted it to be. And then also because we were down an hour for the repair, every match kind of had to get cut a little bit. So I think we only ended up having like 5 minutes. But luckily, the good thing about wrestling is, it doesn't always have to be a 15-minute banger with, throwing moves at each other left and right. Sometimes you can just do a good match in 5 minutes and tell a great story. And I got lucky enough, especially with Adrian. He's a great character. And we still were able to kind of tell that story in 5 minutes. And it was fun because I still got to go out there and experience, going on stage, getting in the ring and working with the crowd. It was just a little shorter than I would have liked it to be.
Well, short and sweet's always good, because you
Yeah.
get it in, you get it over with, and you move on, to the next one. So it's not bad at all. Who were like some of your favorite opponents to work with when you started out, and still to this day, who have been some of like your favorite people that you enjoy being in the ring with?
Well, we actually last weekend got the chance to, as the Colorado Clique, work together, and I got to work against my sister for the first time at a CWC show. And I'm honestly going to tell you, that's probably the funnest time I've had in the ring so far.
Really?
Just being able to work with your friends and then also against my sister for the first time was just it was. I've always wanted to work against Nikki, so getting the opportunity to do it, even if it wasn't a trios match, was so much fun. So that's probably been my favorite ring experience so far. And then, but a working opponent wise, Manny Levins down at CSW, that was a real fun experience. Crash Daddy was always a very fun opponent to work with. He's a great guy. There's a lot of really awesome and talented wrestlers out here in Colorado. It's a great scene, and everybody's collaborative and wants to work together. So, I've worked with a lot of great people, and it's always been fun for sure.
Well, it's, intergender matches, trios matches, those are kind of interesting because you don't really see a lot of that in today's product. Do you feel that's something that should happen a little bit more often, or do you feel like, indies probably the best place for this?
I can see why it happens more in the indies. You know what I mean? You definitely have a wider variety on your card sometimes. And I think what happens, especially with the TV product like AEW or WWE, is you kind of get like actors will get typecasted. You almost kind of get type scripted into like, this is what the show has to be, and this is what we have to hit to make those audience numbers work. So I think that eventually intergender wrestling will kind of probably take off, and you'll see it happen a lot more. Thinking maybe to like the TBS division or the TNT division in AEW, that'd be a great place to see some intergender matches. Jade Cargill taking on anybody would be amazing because Jade Cargill is just a straight powerhouse, and you can see her going into the ring with almost any dude and holding her own. So that would be awesome. But it's also one of those things too where you got to remember, I think the women's revolution were only maybe like 5 years away from when that started. So it's one of those things that I think we'll get to it, but it's going to take a little bit of time and building to get to it.
Yeah. We've only gone so far, we got so much more to go. Definitely. The women's division is something that I feel like that can be built on more, put some more layers on it, but it's just amazing to see how far the women's division has gone, and continues to grow in all companies, really. What's your stance on that?
Oh, I love women's wrestling. I would love to see it more. I think right now they do great showcases with the title. Again, they kind of get constrained on where they can fit into the card because there's so many, especially if you think of like AEW, you got to have your lucha matches, your trios matches, your tag matches, and then, your mainstay players who are always going to be on TV. So it's kind of hard to squish in more than one women's match a show. But I would love to see them get more of a place in the card. And I would love to see more of a storyline built around the characters too. They have a lot, whether it's WWE, AEW, ROH, there's a lot of really talented women out there who can really go in the ring too. Yeah. So I would love to see them showcase more. I'd love to see more storylines thrown at them a little bit so we can build those characters out a little bit. But it's going to be one of those things too where it takes a little bit of time. 5 years ago, women weren't main eventing very often, and now you almost have a main event at every pay-per-view almost, it seems. So it's getting there. It's just kind of, it doesn't happen overnight.
Right, exactly. It's just takes a lot of time to get there, but I'm confident, that it'll happen.
Yep,
it'll definitely happen. Okay, so let's talk about your act with Nikki. I talked with her last time. You guys are a heel act. Were you comfortable being the bad guy? Do you prefer being a baby face?
Well, I think Nikki's really comfortable being the bad guy. I think that role suits her very well. She does a really good job at it. When we were training, we were always told you kind of start out as a face. So especially when you were training, we always kind of trained to like, all right, pump the crowd up, work the crowd, get them behind you. So it was kind of surprising when we got asked to be like heels for the start of it. But almost it's kind of like Nikki. Once you kind of find that role, you can lean into it. It's almost fun to kind of be a heel. So
definitely.
Yeah. So I've enjoyed it. I like working the crowd. So especially I think our Colorado Springs wrestling shows, that crowd there is fantastic. They're very interactive. They'll yell back at you. So it's always so much fun, especially if I'm out there managing Nikki, to just kind of work the crowd up and get them to see how much I can boo her or me. It's probably one of the more fun parts of like the whole aspect of pro wrestling.
Where do you think you and Nikki see yourselves in the next few years as far as an act? Do you guys aim to go travel more throughout the indies? Do you guys want to go to a mainstream company like an AEW or a WWE or Ring of Honor? What do you feel you guys see yourself as doing?
Well, I think anybody who's at this business would be lying to themselves to say they didn't want to go to like WWE or AEW. Like that's got to be like your ultimate goal for anybody, really. But realizing too, like where we're at in the business right now in the indie scene, and we both still have full-time jobs and everything too. We would definitely love to travel more, go to a couple more states. This is almost a really good excuse to travel, right? Is get yourself booked in different states, go out and visit the places before you have a show or something like that. Really, we would love to start working as a tag team. Kind of with the storyline we have going right now, she manages me and my tag team partner, and then we kind of go out there for her matches and goof off more than really manage. But so I would love to eventually get to the time where Chelsea and I are tagging together. That was always kind of like our goal when we were training, was like, oh man, we'd love to be a tag team, a brother sister tag team. You never
That'd be
really
the
see that
first
kind of stuff.
one.
Yeah. So that's something that we would love to build to. And I think we're getting there, especially with that chance to work with each other at CWC, and kind of the first inklings of like getting to that process. So it'll be fun. There's a lot of good things that are going to happen down the road.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that for sure. So let's talk about the stuff you've done outside of the business. What charity organizations or volunteer work have you done outside of wrestling that you'd like to share with us?
So I actually got my first big job outside of college. I guess your first big boy job was working with the YMCA as an aquatics director, or I guess you could say aquatics director, aquatics manager, pool manager kind of role. So that entails, training your lifeguards, hiring your lifeguards. If you ran swim lessons, hiring your swim instructors, and then running the programming too. Generally, I worked for a YMCA, so they always kind of had the programming in place. So it was more or less just kind of ingratiating everybody into the programming and running the programming. But one of the things that I loved about this job, especially working with the YMCA, is being able to help those communities at large that are at need or don't get the resources that every other community will get. So here in Colorado, I worked with the YMCA of Boulder Valley. I worked over in Boulder, but we had branches in Boulder, Longmont, and then one in Arapahoe as well, or Lafayette. And one of the really cool things that we did as a company is we provided swim lessons for at-risk youth or students who wouldn't necessarily get swim lessons because they don't have the financial resources to do it. So we did some after-school programs, and then we also did some too where we would bring the kids in during the day. Maybe if they had a break, or like if they had like a gym class, instead of going to gym, we'd bring them there one day a week, and we would teach those kids, safety around water, some basic swim lesson stuff. So not like a full-on, like build you up to swim team stuff, but at least safety around water, how to swim in the water and be safe and stuff like that. And basically just encouraging them to like, hey, this is a safe space to come and learn. And, you don't have to be afraid of the water. We can teach you how to be safe in it and how to be safe with others around water as well.
Oh, that's really good. The Y definitely has just amazing resources and just great instructors that are willing to work with you and help teach you how to do certain things, whether it is swimming or working out, exercising. It's just a very positive environment to be a part of. How long were you working there for?
So with the Y total, I had probably been working with them. I left my last Y position to be a web developer in 2021. So I worked with the Y, from 2007 when I got my first lifeguarding license up until 2021, I worked with the Y. There was some sprinkles in there working maybe with like a city for a little bit as well, doing maybe a summer outdoor pool. But generally speaking, especially in the winters, because the YMCAs were usually the only places that had big indoor pools that were open in the winter, that's always where I was at during the winter helping out.
And I'd imagine during COVID it was probably tough as well because all the indoor stuff was shut down.
Yep. Yeah. I was actually working at the Denver JCC. I had been the program manager down there when everything got shut down. That was kind of a big transition period in my life. I loved my position. I loved working, cultivating a team and building a team aspect of that stuff too. But one of my biggest gripes with the position, especially with lifeguarding, is it's just not taken seriously enough, and they don't pay the guards as much as they should.
Why do you think that is?
I just think that tragedy is ultimately the teacher in that industry, and a lot of communities don't see the inherent need or why lifeguards are important until something happens, and then it becomes present of like, oh, why weren't we funding this, or why weren't we taking this more seriously? I got in a really lucky position with the YMCA here in Boulder. Like I said, they valued their guards a lot. They paid them a very good, fair wage, and as a response to the lifeguards that I had were some of the best guards that I've ever had. You know, they were very responsible. They showed up to almost every in service, and they wanted to learn their skills. They wanted to stay on top of those life saving skills, whether it was CPR, working with an AED, even down to the basic first aid stuff. They wanted to be on top of that stuff because they wanted to be ready if an emergency was happening. But you can only really get that and get those people that want to be in that position if you're paying them the money that they deserve. Like when I worked in Ohio, a lot of those guards only made like $7.50 to $8 an hour. So a lot of the time you were only getting high school kids. High school kids don't necessarily always take the job seriously. That doesn't mean not all of them. I had some high school kids that were wonderful guards and they did a great job. But you do get those kids too that are just think that it's going to be coming and sitting in the sun and just kind of watching people swim, and you kind of break them in maybe through that first lifeguard training or those first joint services to realize like, hey, this is a lot bigger than just sitting in the sun and catching a suntan.
It's serious. I mean, think about like some of the people that have drowned and nobody was there to really rescue them or save them. It's just awful. I mean, Shad Gaspard lost his son out to sea, and he went and tried to save him, and it's tragic. It was tragic all around.
That's the thing that a lot of them don't understand too, is a lot of the times the person that is making the rescue is the person that drowns and not the person that was like in trouble at the start. So being able to kind of tell those stories too, we have plenty of stories that you get in lifeguard training mail that you can reiterate to them, kind of explaining like, hey, this is serious business. So if you're not ready to A, risk your life, or B, ready to, save someone with CPR or something like that, then maybe it's not the business for you.
Sure. Why do you feel passionate about helping out in your community?
That's a great question. So when I first was looking for a job, when I grew up, I did a lot of lawn mowing. It was one of those things where it was really easy, right? You could see the work that you were doing in front of you. It was like, here's your lawn, mow it, here's your money. So when I got my first jobs kind of out of high school and while I was in college and stuff like that, I was looking for something tangible, where I could see myself making a difference. My sister actually started out lifeguarding before I did. So that's kind of how I got started in it. But that was like, once I started lifeguarding and first or second year I was into it, and I could really see like how it affects the community, how teaching these kids at a young age, not only how to be safe around the water, but then giving them those resources to swim in the water and be safe, how that affects the community moving down the road. Because now you're teaching those kids as they get older, like when they're by themselves and they don't have an adult around, hey, this is how you can be safe in the water. Or, hey, maybe don't even get in the water until you do have an adult around or something like that. So it was one of those things where I could literally see the work that I was doing and how it was making a difference in the community as I was doing it. There's a lot of jobs, especially now with web development, you work more a part of a bigger picture. So you work in a small section of a bigger picture as a whole. So you don't always see the tangibles of your work being applied to the bigger product. But when you were in lifeguarding, whether it was teaching swim lessons, actually lifeguarding and keeping everyone safe in the water, or when I was managing too and just interacting with the community on a daily basis, it was so tangible to see the work you were doing in front of you. That's what I really loved about it, is I could see how I was affecting the community in a positive way day in and day out.
Definitely. And how long have you been working with web development?
So COVID was when I switched. Like I said, I got a little burnout from the industry after doing it for 15 plus years. I loved it to death. I loved training lifeguards and building a team, but I just kind of needed a little bit better pay. So I switched to web development when COVID came around, because it almost seemed like the perfect time. Everything was shut down. I had the resources to go to a web development camp. So I just kind of jumped on that opportunity, and I got really lucky and got a government gig right out of school. So that was really cool too. So yeah, I've been a little bit lucky, especially with all the jobs that I've gotten, whether it was working with the YMCA and having great directors and people that supported me, along with great lifeguards and swim instructors that wanted to help the community, or even now working with this company that I'm working with and all the resources it applies to its employees. And we're also working for the Defense Health Agency. So again, helping people, bringing them resources to kind of stay healthy and connect.
That's so awesome. Well, Logan, this has been wonderful getting the chance to talk with you about, your career and what you've been doing outside of wrestling. Where can people find you on social media?
Sure. You can always find me on my Facebook and my Instagram, Logan Chase. I believe my Instagram is nightmare_Logan Chase.
Awesome. thank you again, Logan, for coming on, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.